I decided to buy a compound bow, so I reached out to my old friend, retired Special Forces Sergeant Major Larry Reeb, who owns a bow shop and an outdoor adventure store in the Stuttgart, Germany area, and I asked him to build me the ultimate compound bow. I want to highlight that Larry is the real deal. Ranger, airborne, Special Forces, combat diver, highly decorated to say the least. Larry is as tough as it gets. This video is going to be a lot different from my normal ones, but because I've known him for so long, I really want to highlight Larry's shop and what they do. Then we're going to build my bow. It's the PSE flagship bow, the Evo NXT. Archery superstar John Dudley of Nock On Archery has developed a signature series version of this exact same bow with his logo, his favorite green strings and color variations, but only one sight position, 2 arrow rest holes, and a fixed cable guard. Whereby the NXT has 3 sight positions, only 1 arrow rest hole, and an adjustable cable guard. PSE and John Dudley have named it the Evo NTN. I went with the black NXT. It was a couple $100 cheaper, and I thought the all black looked really tough. This video is very long, but if you're interested in building a bow and want to see how to do it step by step, then sit back and enjoy. Let's go meet Larry.
Hey ladies and gents, hey, my name is Larry Reeb and I'm the owner of Larry's Ultimate Hunting and Outdoors Adventures. It's quite a mouthful, I know, so we can just call it Larry's for short. About a week ago, a good buddy of mine came in and he asked me to put him a bow package together, a mid to high grade package, and he wanted to video this so he could put it on his YouTube page. So being a hunting / archery shop, I thought, well, hey, why don't we just go ahead and incorporate in that video a little bit about what it is that we provide as far as services go. And then that's why I'm here right now. So here it is. Folks, we hunt. We take folks hunting. We take folks hunting all throughout Europe: France, Italy, Spain, Croatia, Poland, Hungary, Slovenia, my favorite. And then we hunt all species that are indigenous to Europe: red stag, ibex, chamois, wild boar, raybuck, fallow deer, just to name a few. Our outfitters are some of the best outfitters I know, and folks, I know a few. We have reoccurring hunts with these guys every year, about 7 hunts to be exact. And of course, we've maximized the long weekends and the holidays to lessen the impact on the clients. And we've also, taken into consideration peak peak periods where harvest is amplified, so folks get what they're after. We also do a little bit of weapons familiarization courses. We do a little bit of weapons repair. We have an indoor range, so we have archery clinics for both adults and youth alike. We have an outdoor bow range where we have bow tournaments, on the weekends. And then we also dabble in wilderness enhancement, survival training. We've just added to our portfolio this year hostile environment awareness training. With the increased dangers of traveling nowadays, companies, corporations are starting to understand that, hey, we need to train our people on what to do and what not to do while traveling to keep their folks safe. We're happy to provide that training, and we've done so to date, and we've had really good success so far. Folks, everything in my store is on wheels. We move everything over, and we serve as an events venue, a special events venue, let's say, and we serve the Stuttgart military community, which is probably about 80% of my clientele. So birthday parties, Helen farewells, promotion parties, wine tastings, ornament exchanges for the wives, just to name a few. And then we can incorporate the indoor bow range with those events, which is always a crowd pleaser. So as I said, beginning of this, this is a bow build. This is about Christopher's bow. So I don't want to take too much of his time, but I just wanted to introduce myself and provide you with some information on our services. I appreciate your attention. I thank you for joining us. Please stay with us because Chris and Jay are going to do the bow build over here just now. And I just want to say, life is a special operations. You're welcome, Chris. And then thanks for coming. If you're ever in this area, please come in. You'll be greeted with a smile and a big handshake. Thanks. Goodbye. So hey folks, so this is our archery center. So we have a full complement archery shop here. So you can always tell a good archery shop when they give you good advice, when they try to sell you the bow that's right for you and not the big money bow. So here, my good buddy Chris came in last week and we put him together with a PSE Evo, the Evo NXT35. It wasn't the cheapest bow we had, but it was the perfect bow for Chris because he wanted to up his game with archery, potentially hunting, as well as target shooting. And we all know that the Evo is it's a flagship bow this year for PSE, so we outfitted him with that. So hey folks, hey, this is Larry again. I'm here with my lead bow technician, Jay. And Jay is going to talk you through what we're going to put on Chris's bow here. All the components, we call it the furniture. But anyway, Jay, I'm going to leave it to you, buddy. Have at it.
Thanks. Hey, appreciate it. So we have the Evo NXT35 here, large frame bow. One of the easiest I've ever had to tune. Has a 6-inch brace height on it. And here's what we're going to do to it. We're going to put a QAD drop away rest on it. Put a limb saver stabilizer and a 1R Blazer set of sights on it. When it comes to pricing, when it comes to equipment, price tags are unlimited. You can get equipments at $700-800 a piece, or you can get some lower end stuff. I suggest that get what your abilities will handle. And if you want to step your game up a little bit, get into that next game. You don't have to buy it all at one time. So let's get into this thing right away. So a couple things I want to address on this bow before we actually start working on it. PSE recommends that before we put it in a bow vise, that we're going to take a little bit of pressure off of these limbs. So this is a 60-pound bow, has anywhere from a 25.5 to 30-inch draw length. That's adjusted within the cams themselves. And then it has a 90% let off. That's designed from the design of the cam. So what we're going to do, PSE recommends that we pull 4 full turns out of this and pull some tension off of it before we put it in the bow vise itself. Okay, that's something I've already done, and you can always see if you look at this height here between the frame and the limb, you can see this opening right there, and you can see that I've turned that off, and that's going to take a little pressure off the bow itself. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at, make sure that there's no imperfections, that all the hardware is tight, and you're just looking at screws and hardware makes things are good. The next thing we need to realize that the entire geometry of this bow is built off of one central point. And if you look right here, this hole is called the burga hole. That burga hole will generally house a mount, your arrow rest, so on and so forth, but we will be taking a lot of measurements today off of that. Okay, so there's about 5 or 6 steps that we're going to take a look at. One is the cams, are they aligned? Are the cams left and right, and are those limbs in line with what they need to do? 2, we're going to look at the timing of the cams. So are they sitting in the same position on both ends? Because this bow absolutely happens to have 2 cams on it. So we want to make sure that they're timing and releasing at the same time. From there, we're going to come in and take our T-square off of this burga hole, and we're going to measure about 6 mils off of that. We're going to tie in a D-loop. From there, we'll put in our peep sight, tie that in with a constrictor knot, and then we'll start putting our arrow rest in. Then we'll go do some paper tuning. Now, when it comes to tuning, there's multiple different ways of doing it. Like I've said on everything else, I just happen to paper tune. That's my preference. Okay, so what I do, I go ahead and turn this thing sideways, and arrows work really well for this step. Arrows have a really great straightness. As a matter of fact, they even tell you how straight they are. And we're just going to line these up across the cams from one end to the next, and they just happen to line up here. Now, I don't know if you can see this in the video, but if one happens to be this way and the other one's down, well, then we need to make an adjustment. But as you can see, they line up. Now, I always line these up directly over where the arrow would be. We have a few pieces, some silencers and stuff in how this string is built. So we've got to kind of offset it a little bit, but we kind of want the two to meet right here where the arrow would be. Okay? So our cams are aligned on this. Next thing I want to do is I want to make sure my timing is good. So I'm going to look in on the top of this cam, and you can see how this line here is coming across that cam. I'm going to look how this line and how this line intersect my cam. So what I'm looking for is indexing of how that cam is turned compared to the other one. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. So first thing we want to do, see these have the same timing and see that dot right there? We look on this one, that dot right there, and the string happens to reside exactly under those dots. So I would say for initial timing, we're pretty good. What we'll do next is look at a draw length. Chris happens to want a 28.5-inch draw length. I've got into the charts, and we found that that is actually level E on these charts. Now what we'll do is some of those distances, 28, 29, 30-inch draw lengths, are not exactly the same from bow to bow. So we'll have to probably, once he starts shooting it, after the initial tuning, we'll have to make some adjustments more than likely. Okay? So we'll go ahead and leave it on E, which happens to be 28.5-inch draw length, which we have pre-measured. So that gets us in to really the next step, and that's where we start taking our T-square and we start measuring and lining up things. So first thing I want to do is go ahead and put my T-square in. Go ahead and just mount it on the bow here. And what we're looking for, let me just get a pointer here, is this line here is at the very bottom line of that burger hole. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just start running that down until it disappears. And then we'll just make a fine adjustment on it. Okay? One of the tools that I like using a lot on this is just a standard run-of-the-mill fine white paint marker. And then I'm going to go ahead and mark. So once I get that, let me get my head in the way here. Okay. From the bottom of that line, I'm going to go ahead and come up 6 mils. So each line is 2, 4, and 6. And that is the very bottom knocking point where I'm going to start tying. So I use BCY serving, and we're just going to go ahead and tie in a bottom knocking point. You use a surgeon knot, which is actually pretty easy to do. Just think of your standard square knot, but you're going to just double it over. And I'll show you a couple of those, and then we'll get to work on it, okay? So I take about probably 20, 24 inches. It's easier for me to take a little bit longer string and do this. And the first knot I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and set this equipment up so it works for me a little bit better. Get it in position where it's easy for me to work on. Start on the bottom and just start with your standard run-of-the-mill square knot. It's just one loop through, just like that, if that makes sense. The surgeon knot is nothing more than I'm going to go through it one more time. So instead of once through, I'm doing it twice. I come down, and this is the very top of my bottom knocking point. I'm going to go right over the top of that white mark that I just made on there, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten it in on top of that serving. Okay? Now I've tied this one on top of the string. The next one I'm going to tie on the bottom of the string. And we're going to do about 7 to 8 of these total. Okay, so once I've done about 8 servings, I'm going to go ahead and just cut the end of it off. I'm going to leave about 1/4 inch because we're going to melt those and make a tail. Take your lighter. Now here's the point. I never want heat to touch the string or the serving. I want to kind of keep the flame away from it. So I kind of rotate it up, and then I come in from the side, and so that flame is going up. And just as it gets to a point, put a dab on the finger, and now that knot is locked in. Just like that. Now, the top one is a little different. So when this string is straight, there's no pinch point on this knock of the arrow. But as I draw this back, this is actually going to create a triangle here, and these can pinch. So I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch extra space, something like that. And that's going to try to prevent that knock from being pinched at full draw. Now this one, we're going to tie the same knots, but we're just going to do a lot less of them. We're actually going to do only probably 3 to 4. So how I was taught to do bows is Hanny Luchtmann. He is the German Olympic team bow tuner, coming here for 2 days to teach me how to do bows. And this is his procedures, and I've just done it the same way every time. Okay. So once we get to that point, so this is just the glue for fletching arrows, very close to a super glue. I just kind of dip it in just to kind of give me just a little on the string, the littlest amount possible. And then in between those, so I have 2 upper knots and 1 bottom knot. So right in between the 2 top knots, I just lay in a thin layer of this glue in there. The last knot is only going to be a single knot, just like we did on the other one, and I'm going to lay it right in between the 2 on top. And I'm just going to go ahead, I don't know if you can see that, but I'm going to put it right in between, right in that glue, and pull it tight. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut it off and burn it. Just like that. Okay, so our nocking points are in. So that arrow will sit in there all the time. They're lined up with the burga hole according to the T-square, and we should be ready to go. Next thing we want to do, so we want to go ahead and build our D-loop for this. So we've gone ahead and just take some of our D-loop material. I've measured this out and put 2 burnt ends on the end of it, so that'll help us when we tie our knot from them not slipping out. You want these to be 4 1/4 in length. So I went ahead and measured about 4 1/2, and then by the time I burn it down, it should be about 4 1/4 or so. You can experiment with these in length, but the knot's pretty simple. We're just going to double it over like that. Like that. I'm just going to put both ends through, pull on the end that is closest to the, just like that, and pull it tight. So I like using a set of pliers on this and just grabbing the very end of the string to set the tension in there. And what we're trying to do is the melted end here just to create a kind of a ledge so that when we pull on it, it actually tightens itself. There's 2 schools of thought on these. And this is a very basic knot. They do some anti-torques, anti-twist, some different designs of these. This is a very basic setup for somebody that's pulling straight back, or somebody that has a swivel on their pull. So with that, some do opposite, so the cord is coming across, some do the same side. I like doing the same side, and I'm sure there's 1,000 people out there to tell me I'm wrong, but we tend to have pretty good accuracy with these and do pretty well. So all I'm going to do is just reverse this knot and copy it in the opposite direction. Just fold that over, and then we're going to just start pulling it up. So I know my fingers are in the way. It's kind of hard for everybody to see how to do a knot. There's plenty of books and different videos on different knots. You can take a look. Once I do that, make sure that it all stays together. See how that just come undone on me? You just, once it gets in and gets tight, it constricts on itself. But until that point, it's actually a pretty fragile knot. So let me just do it here. So I'm just going to spread these pliers apart as I'm doing it. Let's see if it'll stay in place for us. There we go. That should lock in pretty good. Now, you notice that this rotated a little bit on me. All I got to do is just sit on the back side of it and just push it around. And when we first set up our sight, our peep sight, we'll probably have to mess with that a little bit. Okay? All right. So now we're lined up with our burga hole. We have our nocking points put in, our D-loop in so we can hold on to it. Everything is squared up. From here, we're going to go ahead and start putting it in the vise. We've already taken our 4 turns off, so we should be ready to go here. Let's go ahead and get it in a vise. So we went ahead and got our Easy Green bow press in here, and we went ahead and got it set in. We have just barely any tension on it. So I keep talking about the 4 turns off for safety that is recommended by PSE. when you start changing the draw weight of your bow, this bow, it optimized it at 30 inches, 31 inches of draw length, and fully cranked down the bolts all the way in. This thing is supposed to pull somewhere around that 60 pounds of range. Generally, it's a percentage. As you change that draw length, being cranked all the way down, that poundage is going to change, generally get less and less. Okay. When we take turns out, that generally removes about 2 pounds of pull per turn. Okay. So if I pull a turn off of this side, that's 2 pounds removed. Pull a turn off of this side, that's 2 pounds removed. So in actuality, we've pulled somewhere around 16 pounds of pull off of this bow, ultimately relaxing it a little bit. So when we collapse it in this vise, as you can see, all I got to do is just turn here and everything gets loose on me real quick. That's because I'm collapsing that geometry in, right? I think the max recommended turnouts on this is something like 10 or 12 turns. Each bow is slightly different. Look at your manufacturer and recommendations for that, okay? All right, so we're gonna put a peep sight in. Generally speaking, we're 5 3/8 inches from the top of our D-loop to where we want to put it in place. Then what we do after that initially putting it in, we get the shooter in place, and then if they have to feel like they move up or move down or have to scrunch down to get into that sight, we'll move it accordingly, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 3/8. This marker happens to be in there just right already. That comes from the manufacturer just to separate the two different pieces of the string. And I'll show you, because we're going to lay that peep sight in between here. So as you see, it just helps us pull that string apart evenly. And this one happened to be just marked where we need it to be. So we have a rather large peep sight we're going to be putting in, and these are easily changed out if the shooter doesn't like it. So let me go ahead and put this in here. My hands are in the way. Just like that. Okay. I need to pull this other string off. Then I'm going to go ahead and give a little tension on it, just like that. Okay. There we go. All intents and purposes, the string tension will keep this in place a lot, but we're going to tie it in with a constrictor knot. So we're going to go ahead and grab some of our serving, and we're going to take about two 14 to 18 inch pieces. We're going to lay them in here, and I'll show you how to do these constrictor knots. Just like anything else, get a book of knots, and that'll help you out a little bit. So I take my top, make it a little bit longer than my bottom, and I'm just going to lay it in this trough here on both sides. Let me do another one. We'll do this one on the left side versus the right side. Okay. This one here, I need it to stay out of my way, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of lace it down the string here, just so it stays out of my way. Okay, constrictor knot. I'm going to go ahead and come over the top of it. I'm going to come off to my left-hand side. I'm going to cross over, come around the back. Sounds easy, right? All the way up until it's not easy. Haha, made a joke. I'm going to lay all the pieces in this trough. Okay. We need to be, I messed it up. We're going to redo this one. That's what I did wrong right there. Once that constrictor knot's in, you're going to have a top and a bottom. I take my top and I do a half hitch off to one side from the bottom. Pull that in tight. And the other one, do a half inch in from the top towards the bottom. Just tighten up those half hitches. We go ahead and leave these intact for now because we're going to do it on the other side. So let me turn this around here. Okay. Okay, we're going to do the same thing over again. Before you tighten, make sure everything's in the trough. Go ahead and give it a tight. Do those half hitches. That's it. We'll go ahead and cut the ends. Just like that. Give it a burn. Always pay in mind for the actual string itself, we don't want heat next to it. Okay, so 90% of that knot is done right now, or let's say 50%. We're going to go ahead and we're going to tie these ends, and what we're going to do is basically tighten these up a little bit so it can't move as easy. Now these knots will be free floating, so you could just take your fingernail and move them. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and tie this in. Could do about 4 turns right up next to each other. Then I'm going to just lay it as if I'm going to go ahead and turn it on the same side, or as I'm continuing to turn. I'm going to make myself a little bit of an opening here. I'm just going to tie about 3-4 turns through there. Something like that. And then I'm just going to take the tail and I'm going to lay it underneath my wrapping. Just keep my fingers to keep it in place. Okay, and there's the last one. So we're just going to keep it all tight. And just cinch it down. That way that tail is hidden. All we got to do is cut and burn. Just like that. Now what this does is if we need to move this peep sight, all I do is just take my fingernail and I can just move this up and down as appropriate. If it's not sitting in there tight enough, just slide it up a little bit more, and that's it. Same thing with the peep sight. Now we'll go ahead and do that on the top end as well. Now, one thing that we notice here is that as you pull this bow back, you're not gonna be able to see through that peep sight. It kind of needs to be like that, so as it geometry changes, right? So what I'm going to need to do is pull the bow out of the press, so we'll take tension off of it. Make sure I'm going the right direction here. Okay, then we take a look at it. So we notice if we pull on this, we can rotate that string. The other thing is the string is wound underneath these servings all the way around. That string, that is even all the way through. As I move this up and down, it's going to rotate because that string is wound, right? And you're in between 2 layers of the string. So the problem is how do I get this to stay straight as I pull it back so the eye can see through it easily? What we have to do is we have to fire it once or twice, get the height set, and then what we'll do is we'll put it back in the press, we'll disconnect it here from the cam itself, unwind it, or take it off the cam, and then we'll increase turns to get this to rotate into position. There should never ever be a time that your peep is off. If it is, if you get it back from a Bowtech and it's off, make sure that they go and take care of that. But let's say that you've shot it 100 times, and it's changing, right? Reason that is these strings will have a little bit of give in them, and over time they start wearing a little bit. Same with the cam, same with the bow. So that's to be expected. Take it back to your bow tech, have them do that. If you have a bow press, 4 turns out, put it in your bow press, you turn the string accordingly. Now, let's say you're out hunting or at a competition meet or something like that. Your peep sight was perfect. The next shot, it's not. There's a lot of techniques for that. Some people will pre-adjust, adjust it one way. Some people will put tension on their D-loop, because you can rotate this D-loop around. Put it in a position so that when you put a little tension on it, as you put tension on it, you turn, and you can see how that peep sight will turn for you. So you want it to always be when you're pulling straight back, but let's say I need a quarter turn to the left, I would position this quarter turn to the right, put tension on it, pull it back, and now that peep sight may be in line for you. And lastly, if that doesn't work, a lot of people will go to full draw and then try to get over there with their lip or their nose or something to try to give it a little bit of a turn for them. All little tricks to help yourself out, but ultimately you need to take it back to a technician to go ahead and get that squared away for you. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our arrow rest on. Chris has decided to go with the Apex Covert. Pretty easy to install. It's kind of a high-end piece, but it'll give him years and years of reliability. So in doing that, a couple of things we need to look at is this arrow rest is in the flat position. We need a little bit of string tension to get that thing to pull up and stay in position. So first thing we're going to do is use the mounting screw. We'll mount it to the main frame through the burga hole. And then from there, we'll tie this to one of the cables. As this cable draws down, that'll give that pulling motion to it. Okay? Let's go ahead and get it ready. Okay. So I've come in. I like using this mating surface here to mount up against the back side of the frame. And so we'll just go ahead and put that into the burga hole, and we'll tighten her down. Okay. Go ahead and attach it to the bottom cable. There we go. Just put a little bit of tension on it so it still slides. Make sure it stays together but still slides, which is kind of difficult in some of these. Well, this may take us a couple of times, but we'll go ahead and give it a full draw. And make sure that the hammer on the inside is good to go. Now hopefully it'll stay in place for us, just like that. Now that tension is set, we go ahead and I'm going to make it just a smidgen longer or shorter, take more resistance to pull it, and that way now let's go ahead and see if that pulls up and stays in place. Just like that. It just stays in place. That's full. No extra tension on it, nothing extra needed. We'll give it one final tighten, and she's done for getting the arrow rest in the up position. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and set an elevation and a windage on this. So we'll take an arrow, we'll set it in place, and we'll do a couple of measurements. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to look from the side at our burga hole, which actually resides right behind here. I want the bottom of this arrow and the bottom of that burga hole to be lined up. As you can see, we're pretty close, but there's a little adjustment. It looks a little high to me from right here. So we'll just get after it and we'll start playing with it a little bit until we get those to line up. Okay, so there'll be 2 adjustments on this. If you ever in doubt on which is which, just get with your directions. No man really looks at directions really, but if you need to, they're there and available. This one happens to be on the side for our elevation, so we'll just go ahead and loosen up the hardware for that. Set that adjustment looking from the side. There you go. Now if you take a look at that, you'll see the bottom of that arrow is pretty much in line with the bottom of that burga hole. Okay, so we'll go ahead and give that a nice little tighten. Don't over tighten things and realize it's just cast aluminum. Next thing we want to do is actually do a measurement. So if you want to come around to this back side here, Chris, what I'm looking for is 21.5 mils, and it is going to be from this edge here to the center of my arrow. So if you look at this, right now I'm at like 20, maybe 21. So we may paper tune that, take a look at it, see how it is. More than likely, the center of this arrow, the measurement should look a little bit more like that. But we're really super close right now. We'll give it a shot, see, and there's always some final adjustments when we come to paper tuning. So, recap, because we're about ready to start shooting. So we checked the alignment of the cams, so make sure that they are lined up left and right. We checked our timing. We went ahead and from the bottom of our burger hole with our T-square, we put in bottom knocking point, put in top knocking point in our D-loop. From there, we put the apex drop away arrow rest on, we set the tension on it, and we set the elevation and windage. Now it's time to go shoot. All right, guys, we're at the point in the build right now that we want to get an initial paper tuning. All we're really looking at is this arrow rest, elevation and windage in correlation with our knocking point and the arrow size and the amount of draw, weight, and length that we have on this, is it all working together? So a couple things we want to talk about real quick. When this bow is at 60 pounds and 28.5 inch draw length, with 100 grams on the front of the arrow, we're going to need somewhere around a 400 spine. And that is the flexibility of that arrow to resist the amount of weight in the front versus the weight in the back and how much bow is there. You'll find that when paper tuning, that if you have like an up and to the right tear, it's more likely a spine issue. Up and to the left issue, you could be the same thing. So what we've selected for this, we've still got our poundage down a little bit. I've looked at the charts for PSC online, and it says I should be in a 400 spine arrow. So I've got one selected, and we'll use the same arrow over and over again. The next thing I want to do is talk about some shooting fundamentals. I don't need a sight for this. I don't need to see what I'm shooting at. I just need to shoot it through this piece of paper at the same distance. But I also want to do it without injuring myself and without putting undue stress or torque on the bow. So let's talk about a thing. So my left hand, I'm right-handed. My left hand is my bow hand. If I grab this hand and I go ahead and make a fist around this, right? And I'm white knuckling it, right? I can twist this bow this way, no problem. I mean, I could shake it all over. If I release this hand, everything relaxed, and it's just resting right here on the crook of my hand. As I put tension on the back, I can't put any tension on it with this hand. It doesn't change or go anywhere. So that just gives me 2 points of contact from my D-loop, which I have my handy dandy little release, and then the very front. So when I release from my draw, the bow kind of free floats. It's in its own homeostatic, it's its own little world and doing its own thing. It has no input from my hand doing this to it. Okay. The other thing is, if we look at this handy dandy little tattooed muscle here, when I make a fist and really tighten it up, that gets in the way of the string. A lot of people get string strikes right through there, and that's just because they're gripping wrong. Now, if you look at this, when I release and I turn this hand out flat, that muscle now gets out of the way in my string strike. The other thing is I can rotate my shoulder out, and it also ensures now that I'm not putting that string from my nose and chin area past that muscle, and now I get to prevent myself from getting injured. So that's one thing I want to do. You'll see that those straps go around there, because most bows, what will happen as soon as the arrow is released, that bow is going to fall, and then that rest is just designed to catch it. You're not supposed to catch it with your hand. Okay? So for those people that have never done this before, that's a basic explanation. For those that have done it 1,000 times, I'm sure they know way more about it than I do. And that's okay. Email me and show me some new techniques, because I'm willing to learn at just about any time. So now we've got a fresh piece of paper. We're going to stay somewhere around, about 3 to 6 foot back. We've got our 400 spine arrow. And now all I want to do is think about just being relaxed as I go to shoot this thing. I don't want to be twitchy. I don't want to flinch. I want the thing to surprise me, and I want the bow to do just what the bow's going to do. Now, I don't have a leash on it, so what I'm going to do, when we talk about this hand being flat, I'm just going to gently come around here and put the 2 fingers on the very front. There's a rib right in there. I'm just going to put them in there with no tension. So as that bow goes forward, I'm just catching it on my fingers, just very gently, like, okay? So this is the first time this bow has been shot, so I'm going to go ahead and do a test on the D-loop. I'm just going to go ahead and give it a pull. Never pull one back with the release, D-loop, all that mechanism, without having an arrow in. If the D-loop breaks or my release isn't set right, now I would have dry fired if I don't have this. That creates a harmonic throughout the bow, ruins the strings, can ruin the limbs. You can just put a couple of $1,000s down the drain, okay? My safety aspect, people do what they want to do, but I always put my finger on the back side of the trigger, forcing it forward and make sure that it's locked in place. From there, I'm going to go ahead and just get it set in the crook of my hand, and I'm just going to give a nice steady pull back. Okay. As you can see, I can move this all around with my left hand. This has 90% let off on this NXT35. Then I'm going to put my fingers up front. I'm just going to relax. I'm just going to think about really, really just somber things and just be as relaxed as I can. Okay. So let's evaluate this. This has an up and to the right. Right here, this is where the head of the arrow came through, and as you can see, this is where the tail came through. So let's only fix one axis at a time. So I follow the tail, is the way I do it. So that means that my arrow rest needs to go right and needs to go up. Now, is some of this spine? I would say at this point, if the arrow is too long, maybe, but for the most part, no, because we've already looked at a 400 grain arrow, and we know that the draw weight, being what it is, that's what it's designed to do and where it's supposed to be at. So let's go ahead and make it a minor adjustment, and let's see if we can't start getting this to draw in a little bit for us. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and just bump it up just a tad. So I'll go ahead and get to my adjustment on the side here. Looking, and just make, right here I've got a little graduated and a little line. I'm just going to go ahead and bring it up just a tad. That might be too much, but we'll see. And then let's go ahead, and since this is a pretty big arrow to begin with, let's go ahead and take it to the right here just a little bit. And I'm looking inside. I've got another scale on the inside in here. Let's move it just a little bit. Okay, that might be a little too much, but we'll shoot that same arrow again. Give me a second, I'll go pull it. We always think about safety when we're dealing with any type of weapon, knife, gun, whatever that may be. Archery has no exceptions to that, right? When you're firing an arrow, or releasing one, if you will, you want people to stay behind you, kind of like you don't want people when you're firing a gun forward of your muzzle. We rarely see a lot of incidences within archery outside of the occasional strike on the forearm or something like that. We've seen the occasional string break, stuff like that. Not a lot of injuries until you get to this point right here. These are put in there pretty hard, moving 300 foot per second, something that weighs about 400 to 650 grains. They can get in there pretty good. What you'll find a lot is they don't move and they don't move, so people will stand behind them and pull, and then they'll just rub them right into their abdomen or in a leg or something like that. Shooting broadheads are also pretty dangerous at times. So just make sure when you're doing this, stand off to the side, use a little caution, and shoot 100 arrows versus only shooting the one. Okay? So we use a little handy dandy gripper to help because my strength isn't the same as it was, and just pull them out off to the side. Okay? Just target back in. Safety tip of the week. Okay, so we have now just our right tear, our vertical is out of it. Okay, so we'll go ahead and make that adjustment. Yeah, so you can see the difference between these two arrows. This is much tighter than this one here. Not a huge difference, but enough. If you pull those in, you can see that's a concentric circle. This is two separate circles working left and right. So I would say we're pretty much there. One thing that you can see right offhand is now that we've adjusted the peep sight with him shooting, trying to get his eye height and everything adjusted, you can see this is turned. So that's one of the pieces that we're gonna do. But I need to do some final adjustments first. I can't do that without putting the sight on. So we've got a 5-pin, a fully adjustable sight here from the IR Blazer. Mounts on with just 2 screws, just like most other pieces of equipment. So let's go ahead and put that in real quick. Right on the side here, you'll see there's a variant of mounting positions. I find with 90% of the stuff we do, if I use the second setup, is a pretty good position to start. If we run out of adjustability, we can go back at a later time and move those down. you notice here, there's also adjustability for moving this thing in and out. I find with new young shooters, they want to probably be in this first pins and pull these in closer. Less magnification as they are moving, just like shooting a gun. Archery is no different. You have those 8 principles. Well, when you get in the bottom of that respiratory pause as you're getting ready to shoot, and you get that big figure 8 starting to go, when it's out here, it's magnified quite a bit. So let's give him as many advantages as he can, and we're going to set this in as close as we possibly can. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do some initial sighting. Obviously, the customer will want to do this for them. So this is just an initial to get us going and make sure that we're in the right positions. We're at 7 meters here, not real good for setting the first initial pin. It's personal preference. You'll find a lot of people, they'll say, hey, I'm going to set my first pin at 15 meters. American whitetail hunters, they want 10 to 15. Some people say 20 because then they can do a 20, 30, 40, 50 and on down each pin. Set to your own personal preference. We're just going to get the basic set for right now. The only way to do that is to shoot it in. All right, so here we go. Number 1. Not too bad for where I initially set. I'm within an inch of where we put. So we're pretty good. Now, a couple of things I want to talk to you about when sighting. Let me grab a pen here real quick. And if you come over to the back here, let me pull this off so I can draw for you real quick. We have 2 pieces that we're lining up. We have our peep sight, which is on our string. It's nothing more than a circle. The eye naturally wants to center things within a circle, like a dot. It'll put it in the center. The other thing that we have is we have our front sight, and it kind of is mostly a circle and has a couple of these pins in here. Looks something like that. Now what we really want to do is we want this sight in our eyeball, the Mark 1 eyeball, to look through this and to look into this. Now how do you do that? Some will say that you want to center this pin, let's say this is our 20 meter pin with the circle around it. That is incorrect. So you take that outer casing, which will have like some true glow type stuff on it, so it stands out, and you take your peep sight and you make concentric circles. My drawing's a little off, but I think you guys get the idea. So as your eyeball is looking through that peep sight, this is how it should look. The rest and the peep sight should be concentric. Now from there, then you put this pin, whichever pin you're using, whatever sight distance you're using, on your target. So let's say this is a 20 meter pin. I'm 20 meters away. And then from this, now I can move this left and right to set left and right, and I can move this pin up and down to set 20 meters. So that's tip for initial sighting. So we went ahead and put a 4x4 target down range. We're gonna go ahead and see where we sit with that. Our elevation can be off a little bit. Matter of fact, I want to be quite a bit high, several inches in this one. Just because we're at 7 meters, I like to set my first pin at 20. So let's see where we're at. Making those concentric circles. Put my top pin right on. So as you can see, we're down and to the right here. We're probably, I don't know, maybe 4 inches, something like that off. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll take that front sight and I'll go ahead and move that over to the right, effectively making me aim to the left. And let's see if we can't get this to line up a little bit. We'll work on windage first, and then from there we'll start working elevation, just because elevation is not that important right now today. It is when we're out in the field and when we're doing things, but at a 7 meter target, it's not effective, right? So let's work on windage, we'll get them in line, and then when we could step out to 20 meters or 40 meters or something like that, then we can start working our windage a little bit better, okay? Or our elevation a little bit better. So for our initial adjustment, we said that we needed to be down and left. So let's just go ahead and work with our left initially. So we're gonna go ahead and loosen up our clamp here. On the inside here, you can see we have a little scale just for reference. And let's go ahead and move that left. And it's actually quite a bit for 7 meters, so let's start about there. Let's see what that does for us. We'll shoot another arrow and see what it does for us. All right, arrow number 2, here we go. Using all those same principles, shooting, high elbow, nice and easy. Got my bow hand relaxed. Got my forearm out of the way, anchored point as well, and I'm using concentric circles. Deep breath. At the bottom where we get our pause. And as you can see, let's go down and take a look, but as you can see, I've brought it in quite a bit. All I made was an adjustment for windage, left and right, and we need to go a little bit more, right? Our elevation isn't changed, so that tells me as a shooter I'm doing okay at 7 meters. I hope I do good at 7 meters. Let's go ahead and make one more adjustment. Let's see if we can't get that in line here. Okay. Adjustment number 2 is made. Arrow rest is up. And here we go, arrow number 3 on initial sighting. Bow hands relaxed. Do my breathing, concentric circles. There we go. That was me flinching a little bit high, but as we can see, our left and right is pretty good for initial setup. Now my eye is going to be a little bit different than the customer. And we're at 7 meters, so we're trying to use a 20 meter pin. That arrow should be hitting up in here somewhere for 20 meters. But it looks like our left and right is pretty good, so we'll leave that alone for now. Let's start bringing it up a little bit, let the customer shoot it, see what they think. All right, guys, we've taken the bow from basic from the manufacturer. We've checked all the specs and parameters on it. From there, we've went through every aspect of this, and we've made this to where Chris, the primary shooter, the customer, if you will, it's optimized and tuned to him. One last thing we have to do is, as we have moved this peep sight up and down, it is rotated. We've got it in the position that Chris feels comfortable with. He shot it multiple times. For a first-time shooter, he does very, very well. So what we need to do is now keep this in position, but get it rotated so it's proper. What we want this to look like, sitting still and when it's being shot, is we want this to open up and sit just like that. How do we do that, right? As you see these brown lines through here, it's 2 different lines and they're twisted together. And as you can see, as I turn, they twist, right? So I'm gonna go in here and collapse the bow down. I'm gonna pull the string off. I'm gonna rotate it by putting more turns into that string. If I do less turns, all the turns that are underneath this will take a little while for its way to work out, 60, 80, 100, 200 shots, whatever that may be, and I'll be back here doing it again. If I increase it, it increases very little in here, and it actually kind of tightens things up, and I'll see results almost instantly. So let's get to it, and I'll show you how it's done. So I'm gonna wind down the press here, take a little tension off, okay? From there, I'm gonna take the main line, the string off the cam, and I'm gonna unthread it. So if you want to come around, I'll show you on the back side here. This loop right here just fits over that little button. So you take that off. Remember how things are routed. Everything is routed on the back side of this string and in between those two. I'm gonna come out here, and I'm just gonna twist it. I'm gonna twist it this way, increasing it until I think I've got a good solution. Now you can see that's in line. We may have to do this once or twice, but now I'm gonna just keep that in line on the left side of that cable, in between those two, and over the pin. Threading this down into the groove in the cam, just like that, okay? Now, before I undo this, I want to make sure everything is in place, because the last thing we want to do is have a cable off or a string off or something like that. I go to draw it back and we end up having something misfire, we have a problem with it. So everything's tight. Once I do that, I just put a little tension on it right here, okay? Now, there's something wrong. See this? That shouldn't be loose like that when I have tension on it. So if you look over here, okay, that one's good. That one's good, that's good. Okay, it looks like we're actually in really good shape. Yep, okay. We'll go ahead and release it. Now, if I'm worried about dry fires, where am I worried about it? I'm worried about this D-loop. I'm worried about something coming across on the cams. I'm also worried about my release. One thing, I do this so often and so much, and hopefully I don't mess this up or I'm gonna bite my words, is things like this, I go ahead and pull back without an arrow in it, because I'm just using my fingers on 45 to 50 pounds of draw. I can pull that back pretty easy, and most people that do this on a regular basis can as well. So I'm just looking for my cams, make sure everything's lined up. I'll give a little tension on it. Everything's good. Go full draw. Everything's good. We'll just give it a release. All right, and you notice now, this peep sight is now in line. Everything's good. We'll go shoot a couple arrows. If it rotates, we'll do it 1 or 2, 3 more times until it's perfect, and we'll be ready to go. Now, the last thing we really have to address is we have some pieces on here. So this is part of my press and my vise here. So we'll pull that off. Chris has a nice limb saver stabilizer. We'll put that in place, and he will be ready to go. Last things we'll need to address for him are arrows. Make sure they're cut to his length, 28.5 inches. He's going to choose to shoot a field point for the first little bit until he decides he wants to get into the hunting aspect, and then we can talk about, fixed broadheads, or we can expandables, whatever he wants to get into at that point. And then the last thing he'll need to look at is a target. And that's it. That is one PSE Evo NTX 35 full build. If you guys have any questions, ask Chris. He knows how to do it now. Thanks.
That's not too bad.
Not at all.
I'm gonna leave it like that because I don't show my face, and who knows what I'll want to do
Is it on?
with that. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and to forward this video to a friend who needs to see this. Life is a special operation. Are you ready for it?